introduced Diamond. He is currently transforming an alpine desert wilderness into a self-sustaining homestead and organic farm. Through the Oppenheimer Ranch project outside of Pagosa Springs, Colorado, they document and share every step of their implementation in open source format for the benefit of all. He's got a bunch of videos on YouTube you can watch, and he is going to be talking about the medicinal properties of hops, which I'm very excited about. That's one of my favorite plants, so give it up for Diamond.
All right, so this story all begins when I'm beginning my permaculture orchard. I'm bringing up soil from the Blanco River Valley, which is mostly sand and some organics, to create the main hugel mounds. And the first layer I put on was sand, because the soil, you all know the clay soil we have in the valley here, and the valley, same soil over there in Pagosa. It's terrible. It looks black in the spring, like it's this organic, rich, beautiful soil, but then it dries into this tan nightmare of cement. So instead of, because I have experience working with other permaculturalists in Pagosa, they tried to enrich the clay by adding huge amounts of organics to it. And even people that have done this over a period of 10 years have had poor results. So you really need to begin your journey by creating all of your soil initially. And you can do that in a number of ways. If you're a permaculturalist, like sheet mulching, you can buy a lot of rotten hay around here for really cheap per ton, and just create your own soil, or even buy it in bulk from someone you know who has responsible practices to make soil. We made soil by starting with sand and sheet layering on top of these hugel mounds. But what I inadvertently did was I captured some of the native plants and rhizomes from the valley and brought them up to the south-facing side. And what I initially thought was Virginia creeper and some nightmare of a weed I kept trying to deal with, this is a lesson in being present. I'm a permaculturalist. I'm looking at the land. I know thousands of species, and I think this is Virginia creeper, and I'm ripping it out of the ground. Well, I finally did some research, and it was like, that's hops. And so I let it grow. And one of them turned out to be a female hops plant. And this is the beginning of the journey into the medicinal benefits of hops, which is a genus and species is Humulus lupulus. It's hard to say. A lot of people say lupulus, but it's poo in the middle. Lupulus. And so that's the common wild hops we have. If you do some cursory research, there are huge resources that say that hops does not occur in Colorado, which is a complete lie. It's very prevalent in this area, all the way down into New Mexico. The unique thing is that hops is not native. So all this hops that we have, this wild hops, are natural cultivars that have been moving around the country because people once planted them. The plant is thought to have come from China, but there's been very little research on the actual origin of Humulus lupulus, which is the common hops that we're going to be talking about right there. Now, interestingly enough, the family of the plant is Cannabaceae, so it is a cousin to cannabis, and it has all the similar medicinal properties, terpenes and flavonoids of the cannabis plant. It grows in a completely different fashion. It's a perennial rhizome, and where the normal cannabis and hemp we know is an annual from a seed. Hops will produce a seed in the bud, which is the female fluorescence, just like cannabis. But if you want the best medicinal hops, you obviously want the one that didn't grow the seed, because the seed is going to take some of the nutrients from inside the hop bud and take it away. Just like you want cannabis buds that have no seeds, because it's the same family. If we have any questions when we go, this is pretty informal. You can raise your hand. That way we can just get right at it. Now, interestingly, the term hops comes from an Anglo-Saxon term, hoppen, which simply means to climb. And although the hops plant is frequently and has throughout literature been referred to as a vine, it in fact is not a vine. It's called a bine with a B. And the difference between a vine and a bine is a vine uses tendrils You know, those annoying things that shoot out and wrap around, and other types of appendages to climb things. Whereas a vine, like hops, has a very thick stem with these pointy spines on it. So it can literally grow up a flat wall, you know, just using the spikes. So hops often grows on the Sangre de Cristo here, southwest facing steep rock slopes, because it can climb straight up the rocks. It's also very prevalent, we'll get to that, west of Alamusa at the end of the show. So hops is really not a vine, but don't be embarrassed if you call it that, because a vine is a unique type of vine. Does that make sense? This vine that is hops is unique in that it dies all the way back to the ground every year, where something like a grapevine, when it's older, will stay alive in the vine for a long distance above the ground. But hops dies all the way back, so you don't really have to worry about over harvesting a single vine or vine, because it is going to come back from the rhizome. And you're going to be harvesting vines of hops that aren't fertilized, because you want the ones without seeds, so you're not stealing the seeds either. You're just taking the hops and preventing them from rotting for no purpose. So harvesting it sustainably is simple, which makes hops pretty awesome. Now, like I said, hops likely originated in China, but the first documented historical uses we all probably know come from the 8th century, when Benedictine monks used it to preserve beer. You see, prior to the cultivation of hops, we had ale. We didn't have beer. And they were using other herbs instead of hops to prevent spoilage, like wormwood, which is toxic and not like hops. So they made a pretty good switch. We used to do a lot of stupid things in antiquity, like drink mercury and stuff. So the switch to hops was good for the industry.
Comment on that? I used to cultivate hops, so I know a lot. And what I was told, too, is that when they were making ales, and people were drinking this and getting drunk and getting very lively. And another reason they wanted to put hops in it is because it's such a sedative, so people wouldn't be so wild. And that's why, another reason it got added to beer.
Wow, and interesting, I just read early this morning, that it's based on dosage. So if you drink a half a beer only in a 24-hour period, it has a very high medicinal quality. But once you increase the dose, it becomes sedative and less medicinal. So people alcoholics drinking 12 beers, that's why they pass out. It's not just the alcohol, it's the over hoppiness.
And another thing about, on that note, I used to, pick a lot of hops, and I threw up probably that much of a jar in a bathtub with me, and took a bath with them and could hardly get out of the tub. I was so sedated. It was amazing. And so it can be really, it's a really potent herb depending on, dosage.
Yeah, so that is enough to make 100 cups of tea. So she's literally soaking in an overdose of hops. And you can harvest so many bags of it that you can literally use this for so many purposes. If you're a homesteader, if you're at a farmer's market, it can become a whole new stream of cash flow. Because people are paying $5 for 20 little bags of hops and tea in the supermarket.
And they're prolific. And the vine thing, it's like we did string. We, had a pole and a string, and we would let them grow up, because otherwise they grow out, like in your garden, and they're kind of a mess and they kind of invasive. So you want to train them to go in a direction that you want them to go. They'll create a bunch of shade. And they also are so, I don't know what those are called, the little spiny things, you gotta wear gloves and long sleeve. They would tear me up. They just would tear up my skin and my hands. So they're not real pleasant to work with, but they're really, I love them. They're one of my favorite herbs.
And there is some toxicity to dogs and cats, but they're not attracted to them. We have tons of dogs and cats, and they don't go anywhere near the hops because the entire property has catnip. So they're typically sleeping on the piles of catnip, which is a good segue to the next part of the talk, which is the hops plant is not for beer. Not just for beer. And in fact, it hasn't really been studied that much, but we'll get to the good news at the end, that all of the studies that have come out have proven all of the colloquialisms of what it's good for thus far. So the plant has presumably been used for ages as an herbal remedy, and it was often used in the popular pharmacopoeia dating back as far as we can look. It was designed to relieve the symptoms of a large number of health problems before modern medicine, and it has been attributed in many cases to anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties, as well as diuretic, digestive, and sedative properties. The most unique properties are the progestogenetic, which means it affects hormones in both male and female. And it's even considered a cure for insomnia in some countries. And because of all these uses over years and the wide range of health benefits from the hop, it was considered a life-extending drug in antiquity. So you just drink it as a general elixir. Now, the main component of the plant we're going to pass around is the cone, which is the female inflorescence. And you can open it up, sniff it if you want, or do whatever you want with that.
Are these seeds?
No. So the hops you want to harvest is hops that has not been pollinated, because the seeds would be on every petal of the inflorescence, and it would detract from the nutritive nature of the hop. So you want just the female hop that hasn't been pollinated for a number of reasons, because you're not going to be preventing it from proliferating in nature, and you're simply wild harvesting something that's just going to rot. So it has no, like I said, the hop plant, the female, if it's not pollinated, dies to the ground and returns every year. We do have some data that a single rhizome of hop will last 25 years or more. And that is amazing. You can even split it and then continue the life cycle again. So once you have hops, you've got hops.
Will you use it for recording?
Yeah. So in cultivating it, if you want the unfertilized female inflorescence, is there something that you have to do to keep it from getting pollinated?
Make sure there's no male hops plant nearby.
Okay, so ideally you just want to grow all female hops plants.
Yes, sir. And when you go wild harvest, when I tell you where to find it, you're obviously going to be looking for the females that don't have a seed inside.
Will you, tell us how to identify a male from a female hop plant?
Absolutely. So the main component of the plant is going around that is the female inflorescence. Those have no seeds. So if those had seeds, every single one of the paper-like petals on there, within the petal, would have a small seed nested in there, protected by the petal on either side. So when that hits the ground, just like, I don't know if you guys know, purple orac seed looks just like a pollinated hop seed. It's inside a paper shell. It hits the ground. It doesn't need to be buried. Just needs to get wet, and then it'll sprout. Okay, so the inflorescence of the female is where most of those terpenes and flavonoids are, which is why we're looking for the unseeded variety, because we want the most medicinal effects from the hops. So the active ingredients also contain bitter acids and multiple essential oils. And in recent studies, they found that hops is very useful with multiple sleep disorders, menopausal conditions like hot flashes. So it must have something to do with the circulatory system or the spinal cord, because like the fight or flight. So it's very calming in certain levels, and completely, for some people, will knock you out. How do you say the word? Sedative. Yeah, that's a good word. So we have some free hops tea. A bunch of you have had it. We're going to be making a bunch more. We got a bunch of wild hops for sale for almost nothing, and all the money we make from the sales we'll just give back to Veggie. There's very low instances of allergic reactions, because how many people are dying from beer, right? So it's been well tested in a very large market, but there is the potential for allergic reactions. So the best way to limp into hops is to make a very weak tea and take a few sips and see how you do. Some of the allergic reactions may not occur for 24 hours or more. So, but it's very rare. Like, there's allergies to everything. It is recommended that people who are pregnant or breastfeeding not use hops. and people with estrogen-dependent conditions, including endometriosis or even breast cancer, should stay away from hops because the potential estrogen-like activity from hops. It's very unique in that it can elevate estrogen in females and elevate testosterone in males. So it's like a steroid that makes you go to bed.
Just a comment on that. You just said earlier that one of its properties was that it favored progesterone.
Yes.
And therefore, that's antithesis to estrogen. So we are seeing too much estrogen-driven metabolism. So again, the use of hops as, if you have a progesterone stimulant, would be very helpful against that one dead wrong.
Yeah.
All I want to say that by having
the problem is that, like they always say, breastfeeding and blah blah, don't drink this. That's the common FDA overture. And the fact that there's so little studies on its estrogenic effects because they found that it boosts testosterone in males, I think they need more studies. But like you're saying, it's the opposite, and it could help people that drink too much soy milk, perhaps. Yeah. Which I don't drink, by the way. All right, so the good news, let's get to the good news. There have been 3 or 4 peer-reviewed studies on sleep disorders, anti-cancer properties, calming effects, and they all have isolated the exact flavonoids or terpenes in the hops that is creating the beneficial effect. So all the new studies are proving this is great, but the problem is that Big Pharma is never going to utilize this because hops are free. They can't patent it. And so they're probably trying to make synthetic versions of this that they can charge you for. So it behooves us in our community to get knowledgeable about the peer-reviewed studies, harvest our own wild hops, make our own tinctures, because you can use this for so many medicinal purposes. The easiest way, obviously, is to pick the hops dry on the plant. And this because hops really need to approach 100 days of growing to have the maximum nutrition inside. And that almost never happens here. But in some of the low valleys in Dry Creek and Rock Creek, those east-west valleys that are west of Alamusa and Monte Vista, there are warm areas that stay warmer than longer, and that's where the hops grows in abundance. It also grows up on the steep rocky slopes of the Sangre. I don't know where, but I have located it everywhere west of Monte Vista in abundance in October.
And I found some this summer just directly south of Monte Vista in a little creek canyon, just like growing on the side of the road. And I got so excited because I did not expect to find them in the wild.
There are thousands of hops vines in those valleys, and you're going to be looking for the ones that grow up the cottonwoods that are in the bottom, and you'll see all these yellow inflorescence, lime green inflorescence covering the tree. And you just grab one and pull one down and put it in a paper bag and go. I suggest you, when you wild harvest hops, always put it in a paper bag because you want some airflow but not light flow. So you'd never want to expose the hops to light. Keep it in a dark, cool place. It'll last for over a year with really good terpenes, really good for making teas. It's very simple to strip off all the terpenes and flavonoids into a tincture. You can use alcohol, but if you're alcohol sensitive, my partner, we use vegetable glycerin that you can get organic. And just keep it in a cool, dark place and let it sit there for months. So wild harvesting it for us, I found it naturally in Pagosa on the other side of the divide on the Blanco Valley, which is an east-west valley. The sun rises on one end and sets in the other, so it gets maximum continuous daylight. And if you read about hops, that's what they prefer. And so anywhere you look west of Alamusa or Monte Vista, there's roads that go straight west out of there, tons of them. They all take you to, does anyone know where I'm talking about? Rock Creek, Dry Rock Creek? Yeah? No? One person said yeah? It's on a map. Just go to Alamusa and drive west, and you'll find hops in about 8 miles. So that's basically the gist of the medicinal properties of hops. There's a long way to go with research and development. If you want to begin your own research and development, you can come over to our booth and get a free cup of hops tea in just a moment. or purchase some of your own for the benefit of veggie. And we have some questions.
I live further up north. How will hops do in a northern climate? And would it be, do you start hops by harvesting the rhizome and then, creating your hop wall, so to speak, if you were to create one? Like, I'm up in Boulder, so that's
Yeah, when I did the research on where do hops naturally occur in North America, they said they found a few hops plants up near Boulder, which is a lie because there's probably thousands if they found a few. But the majority of what is known and published in the U.S. about hops is southern Montana. It's up north, up above 45, 50 degrees is where most hops farms are. There's a zone, a perfect zone. I think it's around, does anyone know, 50 degrees where all the hops farms are? Someone knew? Yeah. So this is just a strange occurrence of it coming all the way south because we have an extreme environment like is happening at 50 degrees. It's pretty extreme up there. So the way to get hops in the wild is to locate the vine. You can mark it with a ribbon in the summer at the base. It's going to die all the way back. Come back in the fall and harvest the hops, leave the marker, and then return back in February or March when the ground unfreezes and dig out the rhizome before it starts growing. Then you can just take it anywhere. And then you got it forever.
Yeah, it's hard to get rid of.
I live up about 8,500 feet and was just curious on over by Westcliff there, and just curious on if it would grow up there.
I mean, that's where it's growing wild. It grows from like 85 to 10,000. The vines will sometimes go 500 feet up a rock cliff. Like people with hops farms that have 80-foot high hops vines, in the wild, they're like crazy. And we're in the desert. Like, how is it doing that? The rhizomes must bring in all the moisture and be very large. I've never looked at our rhizome. I just got lucky in an accident with a bucket of sand from the valley.
So I'm curious about, I don't know if you know the answer to this or if there's studies, but talking about the hops around here, you said it's much more extreme environment than places that would typically grow. And usually when plants are in more extreme environments, they are more potent. They usually produce more chemicals. Has there been research, or maybe it's something, have you heard of the plants when the hops are grown, like here where it's much more?
With my experience as a permaculturalist and extracting essential oils, like the original mint, Menta menta, which grows around here in the river valleys, if you extract that essential oil, it is so strong, it's almost unusable. So the hops growing around here is probably the most medicinal type. The hops that they grow for beer, like Fuggles and other varieties, are less pungent with less bitters because not everybody likes super duper pale ale, right? So can you imagine how pathetic the hops they use for like Budweiser are? Because it's like, is it even in there? And so, yes, I would agree with you. Don't have any facts on it, but based on other types of things like that, I would suggest that these are probably some of the most medicinal. If you put more than 2 or 3 hops in a single cup of tea, you'll vomit. It's that strong. You just need a hop in a cup of tea, 1 hop. And still you'll be like, whoa. Because it'll be clear, and you'll be like, what is in there? Someone took a sip and was like, is this weed? I think, yeah. So feel free to have a cup, come up to our booth.
Quick question about cultivation. Can you say something about the type of soil it would like?
You would have to ask Jay. Because it's crap soil where it's growing. It's just some sand and mud, and it doesn't care.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was surprised to find it in the wild. So it was just growing, near a creek. And then where I was growing it in Taos, it was like pretty rich garden soil that had been worked over for a long time. Everything was very lush in that garden. But I would say, I would try it in just about anywhere because it likes to grow. It isn't as picky as a lot of things, I think.
No, it's growing in our most alkaline soil right at the transition to the floodplain, where the only thing that grows there is willow and currant. So alkaline, it's like clay, it's crap. It's crap soil.
You overbrew the tea?
I don't think so.
Well, how long would you steep it for?
We've been steeping it for like 2 or 3 minutes. As soon as it turns, like, starts getting yellow. It'll keep getting bitter, more and more bitter. You know, don't all come at once, because that would be a heck of a line.
I wanted to ask you, we moved to Del Norte about 10 years ago, and my wife planted 2 different kinds of hops, and they've taken over the arch we put in. Are they medicinal too? I mean, is any kind of hops?
All hops is from that main genus and species, Humulus, Lupulus. They're just all varieties now. It's almost like, yeah, they're just seed saving for traits and flavors, so it all came from the same, and it's all just slightly different.
Yeah, because when we bought it, people, are you going to make beer? And it's like, no, just growing hops.
Yeah, you could sell them on the internet. You can make a business of it.
And
People
you
need
said
to
they took
diversify.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In one area.
Yeah, they go wild. I mean, you got to
Yeah, don't plant them up your house like I did. They go under your steel roof. They rip everything apart. These are some serious things.
Yeah, and
the good news, it dies, and you can cut it back. It's not, and just pull it out.
And every spring or fall, when we harvested everything, was taking stuff back, we would go cut out a bunch of the root because it would just keep moving down, and like it would have taken over the whole garden if we hadn't have cut it out. It likes to grow and be mobile. It's very mobile.
So start a sleep tea company and harvest wild hops.
Any more questions?
How'd I do?
Thank you. Oh yeah. Tell us about your YouTube channel.
Yeah, you can check us out at Oppenheimer Ranch Project on YouTube. I don't think I have any more business cards. It's pretty easy to remember. It's like Frank Oppenheimer's ranch. We own a portion of it. He was a scientist. Lee and I are scientists that became ranchers, well, permaculture ranchers. And it's been an interesting, unique story. Our whole mission was to become 100% self-sufficient. Within 5 years, we realized how ridiculous that is and how difficult. But now it's almost 9 years, and we are approaching that moment that if we went back to 1805, it would be a joy.